demons and monsters. The leader of this group was a man called the Undead, a man incapable of dying even in the face of death. He was a berserker who lived for one purpose only, to eliminate all monsters that crossed his path. This person was no Yuna. In a dungeon that had never been conquered by anyone before, Yuna lived with the single purpose of defeating all the monsters of the dungeon. As the protagonist, he faces a large number of powerful monsters that can even wound him and make him retreat. However, this is not enough, as he manages to defeat all the monsters and continues to advance, leaving behind a vast number of corpses. We see him entering the last floor of the dungeon, which is completely dark. However, he knows that the monster known as the Abyss Master is there. The mere presence of the beast destroys our protagonist completely. With a big smile, he says that this place will become his tomb. However, he changes his expression, saying that currently it is impossible for humanity to defeat that monster and that in reality, it's not so bad to die in an unexplored dungeon. However, at that moment, a girl appears, crying, and tells him not to dare to die. The girl, named Li Yujung, tries to heal our protagonist, but he asks her what she is doing and that she should run away. However, she tells him to shut up and that she will save him and that his wounds are too severe, and that it's a miracle that he's still alive. She says that if she can perform miracles, she can save him. However, we see the protagonist dying, and he says that his life, where he only dedicated himself to killing monsters for revenge, will end like this, but he doesn't regret anything, and his only concern was his companion that he left behind. And he apologizes, saying that he couldn't treat her better and is also worried about the other girl, who has just become an adult in this harsh world. With his last words, he thanks her for loving him in this life. However, the girl who is healing him screams at him not to die and that she will go back in time if necessary to save him and that she would pay any price for a miracle to happen. At that moment, a light falls from the sky, and we see two parents, who are very happy because their son has been born. The boy wonders if this is a memory since he is seeing his father, who had passed away, and he holds his mother's hand, saying that this is not a memory, that he can not only see but also move his body, and that he went back in time to when he was a newborn. But how is this possible if going back in time should be impossible? Perhaps a miracle can make it happen, and maybe the girl who was healing him activated his miracle ability before he died. We see the protagonist a little worried, saying that he never thought he would see his parents again since they died when he was 6 years old, being attacked by monsters. Since then, he lived fueled by the hatred of killing monsters, but they gave him another chance, and this time, with his own hand, he will change the future. After that, we see the protagonist, who says that although he got his memory back, he is still a baby, and that in other words, he can't do anything, and his whole life is basically eating and sleeping. However, finally, he was able to do something, and that was to move. We see a girl who is encouraging the protagonist to walk, and he tells us a little about this girl, saying that she is his older sister, and that his memories of her when he was a child were as weak as his memories of his parents. However, there is a moment that he remembers as if it were yesterday, and we see the girl who is embracing the protagonist, saying that no matter what happens, she will protect him. Returning to reality, we see that the protagonist is trying to walk, and we see his sister, who is hugging him tightly, telling him that he did it. After that, we see the protagonist, who is gathering a strange energy called mana, and he says that before going back in time, he experienced many problems because he didn't have much mana in his body, and that this is the reason why he is gathering mana to prepare for the future. At that moment, he is interrupted by his older sister, who is asking him what he is doing and that he had discovered something in the process, which was that his older sister possessed a large amount of mana. However, a large amount of mana is the cause of mana overflow, and it could actually affect her health. That's why he needs to help his older sister control her mana before it reaches that point. After that, we see the protagonist, who is already 4 years old, and he says that as the things he could do increased, so did his time outside of the house. We see the protagonist and his older sister, who have gone to play with other children. A girl approaches the protagonist, asking him why he came to play, and he didn't have to. The protagonist responds that he was dragged to this place, and he is a bit bothered by the girl's words, but he continues to bother her. The kids decide to play, and the protagonist just thinks that this is very childish. His older sister approaches him, saying that since it's his first time playing cops and robbers, she would teach him. The protagonist says that he supposes it's not bad to see her smile a bit. After a while, we see the protagonist and his older sister returning home. However, they are a mess. The older sister asks him if it was fun, and he tells her that it was just a little. At that moment, a stray dog appears, and the protagonist begins to remember how his sister, despite being very scared, decided to protect him. Returning to the present, we see how this person says that they were not able to do anything at that moment. However, this time is different in that in this life, the one who will protect them will be themselves, releasing a large amount of mana from their body. With a terrifying look, they tell the dog to leave, causing it to become very scared and run away from the location, leaving the protagonist's sister very surprised. The protagonist tells her not to worry and that he is strong. She excitedly screams that if that is what he calls mana, then she also wants to learn it. The protagonist tells her that it's okay, since he had planned to teach her anyway. The protagonist's sister grabs him by the arm, telling him to hurry home and that she wants to learn. The protagonist says that's the smile he wants to protect. The incident in which his family was massacred before returning in time happened when he was 6 years old, and he will make sure that it doesn't happen again, leaving the location with his sister. Afterwards, we see the protagonist teaching his older sister how to move an object with mana. He tells her that she's not doing it right and that she needs to use the same amount of force in the same direction to maintain balance. The protagonist's sister says that it is very difficult, and the protagonist says that he was born with the blessing of mana, but has no talent for controlling it, and that the world is unfair. The protagonist's sister interrupts him, telling him to just wait and see. We see that a large amount of mana is released, but she is unable to control it. Afterwards, we see the protagonist and his family watching TV. The protagonist's mother tells him that now that he has turned 6 years old, it's time for him to attend school. The protagonist responds that he doesn't need to go to school, but the mother reminds him that he promised to go. The protagonist says that he was able to avoid going to preschool when he was younger, but promised to go to school at 6 years old. And the protagonist just complains, saying that he can't believe he has to be stuck among children who only know how to make noise and cry. At this point, the presenter on TV says that today will be a historic moment for humanity, and to please pay attention, as they are in the place where their ancestors are. The protagonist says that a new chapter in the history of Korea begins. The protagonist does not mention that after humanity learned how to use mana, people were busy using it all the time and did not realize that when mana was gathered, a new monster was born. And that in 1999, before the 21st century began, a great incident took place, causing the end of a century. Due to this incident, Korea's population was reduced to 30%, and not only in Korea, but all over the world. Humanity felt fear to the bones, as monsters had suddenly appeared. The government and existing laws lost their power in a world submerged in chaos due to the monsters, and the only power that could face these monsters was mana, creating a new hierarchy in the world. The true authorities were the rich people and players who had strong mana, expelling the current authorities and becoming the new ones. But in Korea, which was full of despair, a small flame was lit. A woman who used to be a famous actress became the goddess who protected Korea. She had the ability to prevent mana from being wasted and possessed the gift of white grace. All players who protected the altar would become the sword that would protect Korea, known as the 12 Thrones. Normally, players were controlled by the mana office, but most powerful players went on their own, creating clans and working together like the person who has a rare gift that allows them to easily defeat monsters. Lim Ga-yul was chosen as one of the best-known players of the 12 Thrones, and the players who belonged to the 12 Thrones formed a clan and used the authority of the mana office and the power of their clan to control players. At this point, we see a woman who, with a prayer, creates a great barrier all over Korea. When this happens, all people begin to pray, including her parents, and the protagonist's older sister tells him to pray with them. But he says that God doesn't exist, even in this world, that when the world ended, the gods also died. And, in this point, we see the protagonist's sister who makes a wish, asking God to protect her family and make them happy. The protagonist, noticing this,